Welcome to this edition of Diligence Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about the emergence of board technology committees. And joining me is somebody who's more than qualified to talk about that. Let me welcome Vivek Sharma, who's a board member with JetBlue Airways. He also chairs JetBlue's technology committee, which is somewhat appropriate, since he is one of the world's experts in building and growing profitable businesses through the application of digital technology, as exemplified by his leadership at such companies as Walt Disney Company, Yahoo, and McKinsey. He's also the CEO of Instride, which we'll get to in a minute. And if that isn't enough, he's an author of 2 books, the latest being C-Spark, CEO-led workforce education for the age of Anne. And he's also an adjunct professor of data science at USC's Marshall School of Business. Welcome, Vivek.
Thank you, TK. Thanks for hosting me.
Let's start, before we move on to the boardroom discussion, give our audience sort of the Cliff Note overview of your new book.
C-Spark, CEO-led workforce education, essentially talks about where we are as a country in the context of the last 70 years and what's the role of a CEO in driving the movement. So if you take a span of 60, 70 years, you can say United States was in the age of the nuclear age in the 40s and 50s, the space age in 60s, and has been in the information age ever since 80s and 90s. And what the book says is today we are in the age of and, where CEOs, leaders, board members are expected to drive business and social impact together. Choosing one over the other is not an option. And the moment when the CEO of an organization visibly and irretrievably takes her organization into the age of and, we call that age the C-Spark, that moment the C-Spark, where you're driving business and social impact. You are a good fiduciary, but also a good citizen. You think about the customer, but also the community. And as you do all that, you are a good fiduciary, but also a good citizen. So that's what the book is all about.
I have not got to that yet. I'm a couple chapters into your first book, Wireframe, and I would recommend that to all board members who have not lived that during their career, lived the digital transformation, because we recognize on this show how important that is to compete in the future. And Wireframed was an excellent sort of education for somebody who hasn't lived that world during their career. So both those sound like good reads. So another quick update here. Tell us exactly what Instride, your company, is.
Well, Instride is a strategic workforce education company. Our mission is to help leading employers provide life-changing, career-boosting education for their employees in partnership with some of the world's leading universities and colleges. And the context for this, TK, comes from, as board members, as CEOs, we're all painfully aware of the challenges with recruiting and retention. The latest job report talks about 3.9% unemployment. Imagine the hiring and retention challenges these days, but also not just related to the pandemic, the challenges related to upskilling and reskilling. And so today we serve over 40 large organizations through some of the largest and most recognized universities in the world. And I'm proud to say that since our inception in early 2019, we have helped avoid over $480 million of student debt. So we contribute to the reskilling and upskilling challenge, fixing that challenge one student at a time, one corporate partner at a time. So that's what Instride does.
Well, it sounds fascinating, and I'm sure people can learn more about it from your website. So it's time to move on to the boardroom. So I want to talk about your chairing the technology committee. So very few companies have formed a technology committee, but I'm sure that probably most companies have at least discussed it or thought about it. So I'm going to ask you to share with us what is sort of your committee, technology committee's charge, and what gets the committee's focus on sort of a annual basis.
Well, TK, as you said, everybody's thinking about technology as an agenda in the boardroom, and it's a surprise that more boards do not have a technology committee. If you really, before I come to what we do in technology committee at JetBlue, if you really think about any organization these days, it's hard to imagine a single one which is not being impacted by technology. And these tend to happen at one or more of three dimensions. At the very minimum, everybody is using technology for marketing or commerce, call it digital marketing, social media, or e-commerce, which is a growing business for a lot of companies. In many cases, companies are using technology also for delivering their fundamental value proposition. If you're a DVD company 10 years back, you have to be a streaming company. But the area which gets a lot of attention in boardrooms, which is also where boards have to look forward into the future, is what can technology help us deliver to our guests, to our employees, and in a way that was fundamentally not possible in the past. And it's those discussions that typically take a lot of time on the technology committee agenda. As far as our committee is concerned, like every board, we have the committee charter available for everybody to see. But fundamentally, it's to explore and discuss, what could be the technology direction of the company. What are some of the risks that we need to be aware of? How do we, for our travel businesses, we have a JetBlue travel products business. How are we using technology for that? We also have a venture arm at JetBlue where technology is a key component. So the board, through the technology committee, keeps an oversight on that. And also, we also assist our safety committee. An airline safety committee is a very important committee on how we can use technology. So it's basically across the board. And it's hard to imagine any aspect of whether it's operating or customer facing or partner facing of any organization that is not impacted by technology. So I would say it's a surprise to me that more boards don't have a technology committee.
Well, there's always a challenge about staffing it and which extra committees to have and whatever. I know people are wrestling with that all the time. Strategic planning, finance committee. Now you have ESG committees starting to form. So eventually it gets to the point where, it's tough to staff an extra committee or whatever. But I truly believe that companies should be sitting there saying, okay, what is critical to my business? And I need to have a board committee and particularly a board chair focusing on the issues in between board meetings that companies have to worry about. And I can only imagine, Vivek, with this a virus, going around and having, workforce working from home. And now you have all those extra devices that you have to worry about relative to cybersecurity. There's a whole new set of problems by this remote workforce as well, I'm sure.
It is. I mean, these are challenges we have, not just at the workforce of the company level, but also at the individual level. One of the things the course I teach at USC, Digital Foundations for Business Innovation, this is largely about using emerging technologies, like AI, and thinking about cybersecurity in the context of a large organization. But one thing I tell my students is, think about your own family. In the context of cybersecurity, if there is not one person in the family who's responsible for family cybersecurity, like passwords and access and iTunes login and all that good stuff at the minimum. If you don't have one person in the family doing that, then the hacker is doing it. So you better get your act together. And I think what's true for individuals and families is also true for large organizations.
So at the end of the day, as chairman of a committee, how do you, Vivek, sort of analyze your performance? What do you look at? What is there measurable tools, or how do you evaluate how your committee did?
Board self-evaluation is a pretty rigorous process in most boards. I mean, according to Spencer Stuart 2021 report, 98% of boards in the United States have that process well laid out. We have something similar as well. The charter and details are on our website. Our board does its own self-evaluation, which is led by our NomGov committee. And from a tech committee perspective, which is relatively new, we focus on what have been our priorities for the year. And sometimes those priorities are manifested in terms of discussion at a committee meeting. And then we reflect on that and say, well, how did we do against it? And did we focus on the right things? Do we have the right follow-ups? And based on that and based on the overall board priorities, we set the agenda for the next year as well.
This has been very enlightening. Where can people get copies of either of your books?
Thank you for asking that. CSpark, CEO-led workforce education for the age of and. You can buy that on Amazon, or you can drop me an email. I'll send you a complimentary copy.
I'm sure our audience will appreciate that. And I want to especially thank you for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you, TK, and thanks for hosting me.
And that will conclude this edition of Diligence Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.